Good
As you're on
morning.
stage, you can take the mask off. Ms. Pino, here you go. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning, everyone. Welcome, all of you, to this session of the Setperland Conference on the topic energy to enable the transition. And as you've heard and you've seen, this conference is held as a hybrid event. So we have both participants online and participants joining physically in Bled. Myself, I wished I could be in beautiful Bled. I had the privilege to already visit Bled some years ago. Unfortunately, I could not join you this time. But I'm very pleased to have the honor to moderate this panel. Now, in this 1 hour session, the objective is to get a better understanding of the requirements needed to enable a transition towards an integrated energy system, but a system which is at the same time flexible and reliable. And we will therefore look in particular at how can the digitalization of the energy system support an integrated and gradually decarbonized energy system, and what are the main challenges there. And to discuss these topics with us today, we have a very distinguished panel with Elena Gerard, professor, senior researcher at Energyville, Vito, and co-chair of the Bridge Regulatory Working Group. Elena also worked in the private sector, where she occupied several positions in the field of sustainable energy and portfolio management. Welcome, Elena. She's joining us online. Online also, we have Henrik Madsen, professor, head of section and of the Department of Applied Mathematics and Computer Science at the Technical University of Denmark. Henrik's main research interests link directly to the digital transformation of the energy and water systems. Welcome, Henrik. We have on site in Bled, Marco Topik, as already presented by Peter, chairman of the European Technology and Innovation Platform Photovoltaics. Marco has received several awards for his work, including the highest national award in science. And as said, he joins us from Bled directly. And last but not least, online also, Paul Voss, managing director at Euroheat and Power. Paul has a long experience in managing cooperation between the private and the public sectors, pursuing shared goals, and has played a leading role in establishing the heating sector and district energy as priority fields in the EU energy policy. Welcome, Paul, too. So just to set the scene, and when we think of the increase of the renewable energy production, driven by the very ambitious plans of cutting EU carbon emissions by 55% by 2030, we are really switching paradigm from a centralized production to a decentralized production and to electrification, which of course requires a different way of managing the network compared to our traditionally centralized energy management methods. Sector integration that better links different energy vectors and systems is a way to integrate the shares of renewables and to provide the very much needed storage and flexibility that come with more renewables. And for this, digitalization and more data sharing are tools that can help us, but it will not happen by itself. And we need to give it a direction to make it happen. And the Setperland Conference is precisely the right place to discuss questions such as what technologies, what innovations are missing to make sector integration happen? Or is it purely a matter of rules and regulations? What are the key digital technologies that we should be pushing to be used in the energy system? What data should we exchange? And what benefit can we expect from such data exchange? And how do we go about the risks of digitalization? For instance, cybersecurity. Before opening the panel, let me start with some Slido questions to get the audience opinion, your opinion. In case you haven't been with us for the very beginning of the conference, just to indicate, if you want in your iPhones, you can check under www.slido.com, SLIDO, and then enter the code SETPLAN. If you get there and give you a few seconds, slido.com, entry code SETPLAN. And the first question is, do you think the EU is on the right path to overcome the main challenges to make the digitalization of energy happen in due time? It's a pretty straightforward. Are we on path to tackle the main challenges to digitalization of energy? Yes or no? I'll give you a few moments for you to reply. And let's see if we have feedback coming in. We don't see any replies yet. So slido.com, entry code SETPLAN, and then automatically the first question appears. Do you think the EU is on the right path to overcome the main challenges? And interestingly, the majority believes we are not in the right path. 59%, 60% in fact, believe we're not in the right path. About 40 think we are in the right path. So this shows clearly there is work to be done. So this is one step in the right direction, this conference. So let's look into accelerating what needs to be done. The next questions, do you think digitalization aspects are sufficiently covered under the SETPLAN? And here we have several options. They are very well covered, neutral, poorly, very poorly. And most respondents believe neutral. So it's time to learn more about this. And again, I hope our session today will help addressing the digitalization aspects. Thank you very much for your replies. And with this, let us turn to our panels, to our panelists. And Elena, let me start with a question to you. As said, we have now more ambitious energy targets. We need to substantially increase the share of renewables which goes into the grid and ensure both flexibility and security of supply. Sector integration is a key enabler for this. Now, when you think of the research dimension of sector integration, what kind of solutions are still missing? And how can digital tools help? Thank you, Elena. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Paula, for this question. And indeed, it's a very relevant question because we can say that R&D is really the cornerstone of this energy transition. And then if we then look at the R&D topic, sector integration is high on the agenda and can be, if it's well done, a key enabler. But when we look at it from an R&D perspective, I would like to highlight today 2 dimensions where significant questions remain to be solved. First one is more at the general level of market design. If we think about the potential evolution we saw already happening related to energy markets and markets for system services, we see that significant, I would say, challenges were already solved related to the integration of markets and the integration of cross-border dimensions. But then if we look at it from a sector integration perspective, in the narrow sense, when we focus on the integration of energy carriers, electricity, gas, and heat, we see that the question on the optimal market design is not yet fully solved, and that we don't know yet how we can leverage on the synergies of combining gas and heat in this electricity market. So there is an additional dimension of market integration that needs to be done on top of all the other things that we already did in terms of market coupling and cross-border integration. And that is the reality for day-ahead markets, for intraday markets, but also for markets for system services and all other types of flexibility markets that we could think of. And if we look at it in the narrow sense, market design type, we see that there are still elements that we should investigate related to the clearing of the market. So should we go for simultaneously cleared markets? Should we go for sequentially cleared markets? We should also see how those different market setups could be facilitated by novel order types to be hosted in a market environment, or by different product design for system services. So you see a lot of elements to be done on the multi-carrier market design. But that's the first big X. We have a second way to look at sector integration from a more broader perspective. Then we talk about sector integration beyond the energy carriers and beyond energy services. And these are then examples of integration with the mobility sector, but also education, safety, health, even the financial sector. And this is in particular relevant when we look at it from a point of view of the consumer. Why is that? Sector integration at consumer level is important because it's a tool to engage the consumer. And when we say consumer, we think about relevant services and business models that provide value to the consumer, but also at the same time to service providers and the overall system. And it is possible that today an energy service on itself, it's not providing sufficient value for the consumer to adopt it and to really be engaged. But maybe by combining the value of different services from multiple sectors in one package, the consumer might just go for it. And what is missing today, and where more R&D is needed to have a better view, is what are those relevant business models and related services where sector integration is providing value for both the consumer, the service provider, and the system. Because these services, if we have that view, will materialize and will help us to estimate the impact on the flexibility potential and what support they could provide to the overall system. And it's also necessary to have this view today, because we need to assess how we should change market roles, responsibilities, operational and administrative processes to make these bundled services a reality. So I would say that's a big challenge to be tackled in the coming days, and it relates very much to what's said before. We do this for the consumer, but also with the consumer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you also for bringing the consumer dimension in the role of the consumer in the sector integration. Now, I'd ask the same question to all our panelists before we then enter into other types of questions. So in about 3 minutes for each, next to Henrik, would you like to address what are the solutions that we're still missing, and how can digital tools help, Henrik?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this, of course, very relevant question. And I'm very much in line actually with Elena also. But I believe that we really need disruptions here. I think that the conventional market thinking is a bit outdated. We need to think in a different way. So the markets today, you can have advanced bid or simple bids, but they are simply bidding in energy for a period of time, which can be delivered and offered to the market. And we have in Denmark conducted, together with our TSO, it was led by our TSO, Energinet, a series of workshops with wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater treatment plants can provide a lot of flexibility, but it doesn't happen today because they are not able to bid into a market because their main concern is whether they have flooding in the streets, whether they have the dirty water leaded out from the wastewater treatment plant. So they're participating in flexibility or energy markets is maybe the third priority on their list. Mm. So we need to invent new thinking in the market structure. We need to be able, I fully agree that on a high level, we need to bid into the market like on North Pool and so on, like we do it today, more or less, but maybe with more advanced bids. But on the high level, on the DSO area, for instance, on the feeder level, we need to rethink how it should be done. Because the way it's done today, it's basically a static bid, so it's non-dynamically. And today or in the future, it has to be dynamic, because if a wastewater treatment plant where the main flexibility is coming from aeration of the water, putting air into the water, which can be highly flexible. If it has been flexible for maybe an hour or two, then it cannot be flexible for the coming hours. So it's a dynamic problem. So I think we need digitalization to understand the flexibility in a unified way, and in a way which actually also make it easier for the customer, for the end user to participate in providing flexibility. Then we need, on a higher level, technical aggregators, which can sum up flexibility from, for instance, wastewater treatment plants, supermarkets, or summer houses, and things like that, and then bid that into the more high-level market. We have also done some studies where we have studied whether we could have or classical service-oriented markets on the DSO level. But all the different type of problems implies that the number of markets we need simply exploded. We needed something like 6,000 markets just in a small area, because then we have voltage ramping and a lot of other things. It has to be, I think what we need is to use digitalization to create what we call flexibility functions and enable digitalized and AI-based control technologies to unlock the flexibility at the household level and at the wastewater treatment plants. And that's something we have done now successfully in a number of demo cases. Thanks.
Thank you, Henrik, also for bringing very concrete examples. And I liked your call for disruptions. We need disruptions, yeah. And indeed, it is a lot about disruptions. Now, with the same question, Marco, would love to hear from you directly from Bled.
Thank you very much for the question, and let me start with the question from my side. Are we fit for 55 till 2030? In the opening speech, Minister Vrtovec pointed out that 2030 is actually tomorrow and 2050 is after tomorrow. So we need to act fast and we need to act now, from words to the happening and the transition. It is actually the low solar PV and the prices that are predictable, not as the increase of all the prices of the energies used in nowadays, that will bring up and unlock the innovative businesses also in digital area, which will reshape the energy landscape, either for the electricity consumers, in the mobility, the transport, either in buildings or in actually industry. It is about the strategy how to make things work till 2030. I believe that the citizens are not aware of the transformation that we are already doing. It will be massive, and we will need all and everyone on board. It will be actually also individual participation. And we envision, as a European Technology and Innovation Platform for Photovoltaics, we envision in our research and innovations agenda that definitely we need to strengthen the smart energy system integration of all the sources, of all the renewable sources in particular. We need to adopt and deploy digitalisation, further intelligence in distributed control, as well as hybridization of energy sector as a whole, including storage and, of course, demand flexibility, which is so important. And coming to your question about research dimension of sector integration and key enablers, I believe that we need pilot projects as well as demonstration projects, like prosumer living labs for system integration of distributed generators, distributed storage, as well as demand-side management. And actually, every citizen, every community, every village, every city, every member state, and from the top-down view, the whole European Union needs to be a living lab, to be a living hub for clean energy transition and for the sector integration, that energy is so important for all of us. And so I like the title of centric, from technology-centric to the people-centric approach. And we have so much to do, so we really need to be active, and we need to start now.
Thank you very much, Marco. And this indeed brings the bridge also with Helena's point on the consumers and going further, the living lab for clean energy transition. I like that because it means really the integration of all actors of society. And we need all to really enable this transition. Paul, your views on this question.
Hi, everybody. Look, thanks for having me. I've been really encouraged over the last year or two to see the emergence of sector integration as a European subject. As a thermal energy person, this is an old favorite of ours. We've talked for years and years, I suppose now, about the importance of linking, for example, the thermal and electric grids. And the efforts from the Commission the last couple of years to start to talk about integrating all the energy carriers into a single integrated system, I think that's hugely encouraging, but I suspect that we're still really in the infancy of this process and this movement. And actually part of the problem is exemplified by the question here this morning, and it's no problem, but it's revealing, I think, that the question as it was initially posed this morning talks about how we do the job of integrating more and more renewables into the grid. I think it's normal for us to focus on the electricity and perhaps the gas grids, because those are kind of the twin pillars of the internal energy market. But I think in the energy system that we're going to, one that's more flexible and more decentralized, we'll see thermal, electric, and gas grids integrated into a single system, so that the answer is not always more electrification, but optimal use of the different resources through these different carriers. I've just come virtually from a Celsius summit this morning, where you have cities talking about how to meet their thermal energy challenges. And they're not all talking about how we electrify everything. They're talking about how to find the optimal balance between electrification, thoughtful use of various green gases, and district heating. Because the thing is, I mean, in the future, what happens with electricity, what we use it for, what happens with gas, what we use it for, and what we don't use it for, has implications on what we'll do with district heating. So if we're going to do this as well as possible, and we need to, given the scale of the challenge and the costs and so on, we'll need a fully integrated energy system that doesn't think exclusively in terms of the electricity grid, but how we use this whole thing. And that means that for research priorities, I mean, there are all kinds of things which I see emerging through the SET plan: better use of waste heat from factories, from data centers, etc. Storage, and not only battery storage, but thermal storage, which tends to be much cheaper. And finally, digitalization. I mean, this integrated energy system that I'm describing now comes with a lot of benefits, but there's also a lot of complexity to manage, and digitalization is a huge tool to help with that. So I do see all this as really encouraging, but there's a long way to go.
Thank you, Paul, and also to referring to the work of the Commission on the integration of the energy system. And last year we put forward a strategy on energy system integration, which precisely addresses all these various sectors and how to go about it. And we're now actually doing the next step, which is to implement it and translate it into legislation. Also, your reference to the waste heat and notably from data centers, and you're here with already pointing to the other side of the coin of the digitalization, the data centers, the highly intensive consumption of energy by data centers. How can we go about it in an efficient way? And if you allow me now to go directly into a second question to you, Paul, because precisely when we look at the digitalization of the energy system, we know it brings multiple benefits. We have system optimization. It's enabling new business models. We are enabling a more active involvement of the consumers, as it's been mentioned. But we are also confronted with additional challenges related, for instance, to cybersecurity, as more system components get connected to the internet. And we are in the Commission now working full speed, preparing a new legislation, a so-called network code, which is precisely meant to address the cybersecurity aspects of the electricity networks. What, in your view, should be the next big step? Should we look at other energy carriers, such as gas? Should we look more at consumers' products or at something else?
So, first of all, I mean, I'm not a cybersecurity expert and shouldn't pretend to be. I'm afraid I'm going to bore you by repeating myself somewhat here. I think whether it's cybersecurity or anything else, if we're going to have the type of energy integrated energy system that I've just described, then the same will need to apply to the security measures that we put in place to make sure it functions correctly. So it shouldn't be that, for example, we start to, I mean, if you link thermal and electric grids where there are, let's say, large heat pumps being used, so that where you have limited demand for wind overnight, that electricity can actually be used to power large heat pumps, which can then subsequently feed the district heating network, which provides balancing and storage to the grid and also decarbonized heat for buildings. That's all fine, but of course that cannot become a backdoor that reduces the robustness of the security of the grid. So this paper from, I think it was July 2020 on system integration that the Commission wrote is such an important document. And I think 10 years from now, people will look back and understand what a significant moment it was in the development of European energy policy and the pursuit of the Green Deal. Keep that spirit in mind, this holistic idea of an energy system, and apply it when it comes to cybersecurity and anything else. This is really a different way of thinking about the way we use energy. And I hope that document isn't forgotten, that it inspires not only the coming package of legislation, but the development of work in the coming years.
Thank you, Paul. And you're absolutely right. It is the basis for the legislative work which is being done, for the proposals that the Commission is putting on the table. But I have to say, the implementation of the integration of the energy system depends on people like you on the researchers, on the industry, on the various actors across the society. So we need everyone to make this energy system integration a reality. Now, going to a bit of a different subject, and we mentioned already data. And I'd like to ask you, Marco, if we imagine the establishment of an energy-specific European data space, which is meant to support the energy transition, the system transformation, what type of data exchange can help developing new or more performant photovoltaic technologies in the EU? What kind of pilot projects should be envisaged to address those needs? What do you think?
Well, Paula, thank you for the question. Actually, it's a challenge. First, technology-centered question, both upstream as well as downstream. So digitalization in manufacturing is definitely an ongoing process, and downstream and the deployment of solar photovoltaic power plants. I mean, we have identified a big problem that we don't have access to the data of all the millions of power plants, and certainly there is a regulatory aspect how to make this happen. At the same time, actually, we need real-time data, not hourly average data. So this is a challenge. And of course, the question is how much energy we will consume to collect all this data. So this collection needs to be smart. So we need to embed it on site and make the information out of this data, because otherwise we will spend too much energy on that point. But coming to the challenge of the smart energy system integration of photovoltaics, which is seen as the corner or the heart of the energy transition, we definitely need more intelligence in distributed control. We need improved efficiency of integration of PV systems in the DC networks, not only AC networks, especially in buildings. I mean, all the electronics runs on DC power supply. So we need to revolutionize the concepts and to increase the efficiency in buildings. Then coming to the hybrid systems, integration of all different distributed sources. It is PV, it is wind, it is hydro with storage of hydro, and of course batteries, the synthetic fuels with green hydrogen and so on. So there is a lot of exchange, of course, also on the data level. But let me focus on the projects we identified as a true need. The piloting of smart grid. The smart grid is actually a story of smart generation and smart demand side. And actually, to reduce the cost of storage, we need to revolutionize this, both sides, in terms of intelligence. We need to optimize the need for power and energy by smart generation as well as smart demand side management and needs. And this piloting or demo projects for proof of concept will bring up new businesses, which are also non-technological solutions.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad we have a dedicated panel just after ours on smart grids, which will hopefully also shed light and go more in depth into this subject. Thank you for mentioning also the need for the energy efficiency in the buildings, which is one of the examples of the need for this holistic approach to see the whole system. I still, because there's so much to be said about data and the data space, I'd like to still stick to this subject and ask you, Helena, if we imagine the establishment of an energy-specific European data space, meant to support the energy transition and system transformation, what specific data flows would be the most needed for a better energy system integration and for an enhanced integration of renewables? And here also the same question as to Marco, what kind of pilot projects should be envisaged to address those needs?
Thank you, Paula. Yeah, indeed, there is still a lot to be done related to those data. And one important principle is that we might have now a momentum related to digitalization. We have smart meters, we have a massive amount of data available. But what we need is not data, we need information. So we need to be able to extract, based on this massive amount of data, the right information that can feed into the market and provide or support the needs of different stakeholders in the ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, there are needs that on the one hand, we see at the side of the regulated players, so system operators. We see needs at the side of the market players, so the flexibility service providers. And also there is a need at the level of the owner of flexibility. And in particular, this need will materialize at what happens at the low voltage grid. Because if we look at the uptake of renewables, but also the involvement of the consumer, it happens at the lower or to a certain extent medium voltage grid. And there is also where we see this massive amount of data. So what we need is this European energy data space, making sure that there are as many data and information possible and accessible to all players, covering this full energy value chain. And I give just a couple of examples. First, looking at the regulated players. In particular, if we look at the low voltage grid, for system operators, grid observability and grid monitoring are key to secure a safe environment and a safe operation of the grid. And so there is still room for further improvement. They are, to a certain extent, in some cases, blind what's happening. They don't know the consumption flows, the production flows, and that's very important because the system operator also needs to provide the right incentives back to the market. Where do they have a need for flexibility in the operational timeframe, but also where do we need to put investments in renewable energy? So it's very important to improve the visibility of the grid for the system operator to give those signals to the market for investment and operational security. But also on the other side, if we look at the consumer, if you as a consumer wants to really leverage your flexibility, meaning you want to offer your services to several use cases, to a system operator, maybe to a market player, maybe a long-term contract or a short-term contract. Today, that's really hard. There are data everywhere, there are contractual arrangements everywhere, and it's also very hard for a consumer to have multiple suppliers where he can interact with at the same time. So I think the momentum of digitalization and all the complexity related to it with the sharing of data, of consumption and production, of individual appliances, an EV, between multiple suppliers, which is all happening in the environment of the consumer, we need to evacuate this complexity, take it out of the hands of the consumer, make it almost invisible, but of course it should be organized. And that's also a key R&D priority. That's not then anymore about the visibility of the grid, but it's really about, okay, we want to use the flexibility as much as possible and as easy as possible in the hands of the consumer. And therefore, we need to make sure that those complexity, which is there today related to the transfer of data, but also to do that in a secure way, that is somehow solved in a way that the consumer is not confronted anymore with it. And then a final thing I would like to add, why are data streams important, is also important to start to understanding the consumer. Because consumers, they're not a homogeneous group. It's not something like the consumer. There is a big diversity related to the consumer profiles, but also their preferences and their expectations. So we need to also look for more targeted and individualized solutions to take really the consumer on board. And having those data and look for the right feedback mechanisms so that we can provide the right tailored incentives to the consumer based on the data streams that we will develop will also be crucial. And that brings me to the conclusion that what type of pilot projects do we need? Yeah, clearly pilot projects where we involve the consumer, where we do have this ecosystem on board, where we can provide different signals to the consumer for different use cases in a very consumer-friendly way, but still in support of the needs of the grid. And that can be, of course, very different from country to country. And that's also what we do within Energyville. We have our own open site, our own living lab, where different companies can test flexibility applications, but where we will also have both residential and non-residential users on board that will test in a very friendly regulatory sandbox environment different solutions. And that's what we will need to see even more in the coming years to adopt, to have the consumer on board and to adopt all the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. And again, you pointed to a crucial element, which is, yes, there's a need for the data, but there is the need also for the trust from consumers to provide such data, and the trust that it will be fairly used. So it even goes beyond just the mere system integration concerns. It's really then also about the trust on the use, ownership of this data. Turning now to you, Henrik, and now thinking of a key digital technology which we very much talk about, artificial intelligence. And certainly it can bring many benefits to the energy system. Now, do you agree that this is a key digital technology for the energy system? And what are, in your view, the most critical aspects? How can artificial intelligence help in providing innovative energy services? Your view is, Henrik.
Yeah, thank you very much. As also pointed out by you and other speakers, in the future weather-driven energy system, the intelligence is moved from the production side. The large central power plants will not exist on the longer perspective. So the intelligence will be on the consumer side. So that implies that we will have massive amount of data, very complex data. We will have what we call big data. And in order to understand the structure and the flexibility which can be offered by the consumer, by this and the consumer side, we definitely need AI as a key digital technology for the energy system, but also for the energy system and the coupling from the energy system to the water system, wastewater, food production, and things like that. I can also mention that I very much agreed also with what Paul said before about thermal network. We do have about 65-70% of our heating is provided by district heating, and now we are also ramping up on district cooling. But still, we are in a situation now where we lose around between 15 and 20% of the wind power we have, because the sector coupling is not really functioning. We do have in our district heating system, district cooling system, a lot of possibility to store as energy, as also pointed out by Paul. But for doing that, we need to combine two different dynamical systems. District heating system or thermal systems are very, very slow. Power systems are very, very fast. And in order to do that, we have developed an operating system on which we can also use AI solutions to understand the flexibility, how to construct the flexibility by using the district heating system in order to exactly matching the wind and solar production we have in our climate zone. So in the design of buildings, in the design of district heating system and so on, we need also AI to really understand the structure of this flexibility. Another thing which you also just pointed out, Paula, is when we go for AI, we need to do it the European way. And I had a meeting with Margrethe Vestager. She is chairing the commissioners group on European Fit for the Digital Age a couple of months ago, and she said that the most important single factor is trust. So what we need to do is we need to establish data spaces and use AI in a way which put a focus on fairness, democracy, transparency, and things like that. To have a trust from the people, from all layers in the society, from the industry, from ordinary people like you and me. Another thing which I think was also pointed out by one of the speakers, maybe Elena, is contracts. I think conventional market bidding, where you bid into the market, whether if you're a wastewater treatment plant or maybe a household and so on, they are extremely complicated. I think we should avoid this. We should simply adopt a control-based approach on the lower level, on the low voltage level, medium voltage level. In that way, we can better do sector integration, couple power systems with thermal systems, and we can do it in a way such that the flexibility is still in hand of the asset owner. So in my house, the boss is my wife. So it's up to her to decide when we can be flexible or not. And maybe if we have a 65 years birthday, we will not be that flexible because we anyhow having a big party. Same for the wastewater treatment plant. For the series of workshops we have had with the wastewater treatment plant, they can offer 50% flexibility. We can save 50% CO2 tomorrow in the wastewater, and they are using a lot of electricity and energy. But it does not happen because the market set up and is not really established. But and in this complex setting where we do water, energy, coupling, and things like that, AI is the key concept, both to understand the flexibility, to parameterize the flexibility, but also to use the flexibility in a hierarchy of control problems, and where we simply broadcast prices to the end users, to my wife, to the wastewater treatment plant, and then we can decide either automatically by controllers or by looking at the price to see whether we'll charge the car now or do some water cleaning or we will wait. So AI is extremely important, and but we need to do it the European way. Just to repeat myself: fairness, democracy, transparency, and also keep it simple for the end user. Don't come up with complicated contracts.
Thank you very much, and pointing to the various benefits of artificial intelligence and also the challenges. And clearly, one of the benefits is the optimization of the energy and allowing it to make much more energy efficient use of energy. Thank you very much. Now, as we approach the end of our 1 hour session, I'd like to go back to a Slido question, building on what we discussed today, and ask the audience which of the following areas require further EU policy action when it comes to the digitalization of energy. And you can select up to 2 answers. And I'm curious to see what are the topics selected. So what are the areas where we need further action at EU level? Is it developing a European data sharing infrastructure for new energy services? Is it empowering individuals with digital tools to fully participate in the energy transition? Is it enhancing the uptake of innovative digital technologies in the energy system? Is it enhancing cybersecurity of the energy system? Or is it about ensuring climate neutrality of ICT or anything else? What are your views? I'm also voting, by the way. This way I can make sure the system is working. And interesting to see the 2. So it seems that the members of the panel convinced the audience on the need to develop a European data sharing infrastructure, with 63% enhancing the uptake of innovative digital technologies in the energy system. So those rank biggest, which is interesting indeed, and still increasing. But it seems indeed the digital, and now we have empowering individual with digital tools to fully participate. And on this, I note also a remark by the audience in the chat, the need not to confuse, of course, between the citizens and the consumers. The consumers as part of the market, and the citizen linked more with values. We noted your comment in the chat. Thank you for that. And I wish we could have more time to go through other questions and also in the chat. I'd encourage then also our panelists to have a look, and maybe we can take that up even after the conference. I would like to thank you very much to our members of the panel. I hope we can meet in person soon, because there's a lot to discuss. I'd like to briefly conclude the session, just to give some takeaways, saying that digital solutions and new technologies open new perspectives on how we manage the energy system, in particular the relation between the energy system and its end users. We foresee that with the help of digital solutions, our renewable-based energy system will become more electrified, more efficient, more flexible, and more integrated. At the same time, we need to use infrastructure more wisely. The Fit for 55 package has confirmed and increased the urgency to create such a system. We're putting also the regulatory tools in place for this to happen. Now, I'd like to also draw your attention to an action plan on digitalization of the energy system that we are working on, and supporting research and working with the set plan community will be a key part of this action plan. We had published a roadmap in July and started now, a few weeks ago, a consultation on this subject. And I'd really like to encourage all of you to take part in this public consultation. You will see in the Slido chat the link to the public consultation, which will remain open until late January. And I cannot stress enough the importance for all of us to collect the feedback of all of you, of relevant stakeholders, companies, experts, citizens on these upcoming Commission's actions. Digitalization is already happening. Colleagues in the panel referred to a number of opportunities and challenges. We need disruptions, it was said, and it's clearly, if we want to innovate, we need to disrupt, we need to think innovatively, we need an optimal market design, which is not yet there. We need all actors in society. We need a living laboratory for clean energy transition, bringing together researchers, industry, citizens, and the various levels, from the national EU level to the local and citizen level. The data is a challenge, is an opportunity. We need to make sure that there is trust on the data. There will be a need to interpret the data. It's not just about the masses of data. We need the tools to interpret those data and make best use of it. So it's not just about the raw data, but the information that comes with it. Artificial intelligence is clearly an opportunity, brings challenges, but we can, thanks to it, also optimize the use of energy. Just to pick up on some of the points, and with this, again, thank you very much for your participation, both our panelists and the active participation of the audience. And I wish you very constructive discussions in the upcoming panels. And from Brussels, with greetings and with a lot of appreciation for all the work also by the Slovenian presidency in putting together this conference. Thank you very much.